All right, so we're going to continue solving quadratic equations. Remember, quadratic equations are equations that have a squared term in it, as opposed to linear equations, which would be in the form of y equals mx plus b. So these are going to be quadratic equations, and your standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. We still need our equations set equal to 0, just like we have in the past. Your values for a, b, and c are going to be used, so those are the coefficients that you're dealing with, and c is your constant. And here's how they're going to be used. So you need to know what these values are. Here's your quadratic formula. So if you need to solve an equation, put it in standard form like we've been doing, set it equal to 0, and then you're going to use your values for a, b, and c. And here is how you're going to use them. To find your value of x, you take the opposite of your b value, and then you can have a plus or a minus, and this is how you get possibly two values for x. And then you're going to take a square root, and inside you've got b squared minus 4ac. And we're going to talk about that piece a little bit more later. That's your numerator. This is all over whatever 2 times a is. That is your quadratic formula. And that's what we'll be using today to solve our equations. So let's try an example using that. All right. So first of all, you want to make sure it's in standard form. This one is. You want to make sure it's set equal to 0. And then you need to identify your a, b, and c values. A is always the coefficient of your squared term. If you don't have one, remember you've got a 1. In this case, your b, that is the coefficient of your linear term, that's your x term, would be a -3. Your c is your constant. And be careful, make sure you put that negative with that 10. And it's just a matter of plugging in. So to find your x value, take the opposite of your b. So if your b is a -3, you're going to do a +3. Okay, what we did is we took the opposite of a -3. And then don't forget you have a plus or a minus. So you have two options here. You need to use both. b squared, take your -3 and square it, minus 4 times your a times your c. All over 2 times a, in this case would be 2 times 1. This is the part of the problem you need to work on first. Don't ever take the square root until you do all the math inside. Once you get it down to a single value, then you can take the square root, if possible. All right, so we're going to clean it up a bit. -3 squared would get you 9. Think of this as a -4. You basically have a -4 times a -10. That's going to be a +40. In the bottom, 2 times 1 would get you a 2. All right, so this here is going to end up becoming the square root of 49. So that'll be a nice value. So to find our value of x, we are going to take 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 is 7 and divide that all by 2. So first we're going to do the adding and then divide by 2, and then we'll take the two values and subtract. and then divide by 2. So when we do the adding, the 3 plus 7 gets us 10, and we have 10 over 2. And when we do the subtraction, we do 3 minus 7 and get negative 4, and that's what gets divided by 2. So our solution set, oh, there we go, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So those are your two values for x using the quadratic formula. So what we're going to do now is take the same formula, and I want to talk a little bit more about the part that is underneath the square root sign. All right, let's talk about something called the discriminant. Now I'm going to write the formula again up here real quick so we can refer to it. So the discriminant is a certain piece of your quadratic formula. It is this part right here, not the square root symbol, just the part underneath. Remember, that's called the radicand. The discriminant is the radicand portion of your quadratic formula. So this is one part of the quadratic formula. And that part tells you how many solutions you are going to have. If you're going to have one solution, two solutions, or no solutions. So the discriminant, the value of your discriminant is what tells you how many solutions you'll have. So it's a part of the quadratic formula used to find how many solutions there will be. So the piece we're looking at is the radicand. Remember, the radicand is the value underneath the square root symbol. So the part that we want to focus on for the discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac. You're not including the square root symbol with it. So when you're looking for the discriminant, you're just giving me the value underneath the radical sign. So if you have a question that asks you, how many solutions will this equation have? You just need to find the value of your discriminant, and that will tell you. They could also use the word roots. The number of roots an equation has, they're referring to the number of solutions. So that is a term that they might use. Roots is the same thing as solutions. So if your discriminant, that value, if it ends up being greater than 0, meaning it's a positive number, you are going to have two solutions or two roots. And if you look at the example that we did previously, okay, that was our equation. The value under the discriminant was 49, or under the radical symbol. The discriminant was 49. That's a positive value. That tells us we're going to have two solutions, and that is what we had. So if your discriminant is a positive number, two roots. Now, if the value of your discriminant is equal to 0, you're going to have only one solution, or one root. And then if your discriminant is less than 0, meaning you have a negative number, you will have no solution. Okay, so think about that, what that means. If the value under the square root symbol is a negative number, if all of this comes out to be negative, you can't take the square root of a negative number. So you would have to stop at that point. There would be no solution. All right, so we'll try one more using that discriminant. So we'll see how many solutions we have, if any, and if there will be solutions, we'll continue and solve it. So this will be our second example, and we'll wrap it up with this. All right, let's say that's the equation you want to solve. Let's identify the values for A, B, and C. Our A is a 5, the B is a 12, our C is a -2. First of all, they want to know how many solutions there are going to be, if any. We are going to use the discriminant to do that, so let's do our work for the discriminant. Remember, the discriminant is just b squared minus 4ac. So this is actually a part of the quadratic formula. So we are actually working on the formula right now. All right, b is a 12. So we have 12 squared minus 4. A is a 5. And c is a -2. So that'll get us 144. And this is a negative times a negative. So we've got 20 times 2. We're going to be adding 40. With those added together, we get 184. So we have a positive discriminant. So remember, if our discriminant is greater than 0, that's what we got. We're going to have 2 solutions. So we can continue to solve this. Okay, since the 184 is greater than 0, we will have 2 solutions. All right, so let's continue and solve. Remember, we already have a good part of the quadratic formula taken care of. Okay, we need the opposite of b. b is a 12. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. We did that work already, so we know we're going to have a 184 underneath. Divided by 2 times a would be 2 times 5, so we will be dividing by a 10. Now 184 is not a perfect square, so we are going to have to estimate what the square root is. So when we take that, we get about 13.56. We'll divide that by 10. All right, so what you need to do here is you need to first take care of the problem using the plus sign, then take care of the problem using the minus sign. So with your calculator, get your -12 and then add 13.56. All right, that is going to get you about 1.56, and divide that by 10. So we get about 0.156 or 0.2, so we are estimating. Okay, I rounded it to the nearest tenth. So now let's do the same problem, but let's use the minus sign. So put your -12 in again, then hit minus 13.56, And that should equal about a negative 25.56, but we then need to divide by 10. And that gets you, if you round it to the nearest tenth, about negative 2.6. So that might be one of the trickier parts, is just using your calculator correctly in getting those values. So we'll discuss this more when you come to class.